Okay, back to the Niners.
Yeah.
How ridiculous of a statement is this? You've done a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least ridiculous, 10 being the most ridiculous, and you're not about to hurt my feelings. What if I told you the entire 49ers season basically can be directly measured by whatever kind of season Colton McKivitz has? That Colton McKivitz is literally the X factor in whether this team really is back in the Super Bowl or not. Colton McKivitz, right tackle, the entire season kind of hinges on his play. 10, I'm bonkers. 1, I'm not bonkers.
Well, I mean, is he important? He's your starting right tackle. So he's got some importance, but he was your starting right tackle last year. I just think too much emphasis has been put on Colton McKivitz. I don't think they lost because of Colton McKivitz. I don't think Colton McKivitz is the weak spot on their line. I think the weak spot on their line is at right guard and at center. I think Colton McKivitz is serviceable. He's a serviceable player. He's not the best tackle in football, but he's not the worst. He's somewhere in the middle. I think it has more to do this year with health and how to me, it's not the offensive line, it's the defensive line. Is the Niner defensive line, is it better than it was last year? Is it the same than it was last year? Or is it worse than it was last year? And it could be it could be any of the three, because they did get younger and deeper. They moved off Armstead. They moved off Chase Young. They moved off Randy Gregory. They brought in Leonard Floyd. They brought in Malik Collins. They brought in Jordan Elliott. They brought in Yatir Gross-Matos.
Well, they
how good of a
team,
how good of a D-line is it? Because it's younger.
Yeah.
But is it better? I mean, I like Leonard Floyd more than I liked. Like, if you said to me last year, you can have Chase Young, Leonard Floyd, or Randy Gregory, I'm taking Leonard Floyd all day, every day, just because he plays really hard and he gets you 10 sacks a year. The other two guys don't play really hard, or if they do, they weren't ideally suited for this scheme.
Yeah, we had a front row seat to their disappointing performances in 49ers uniforms, right? I mean,
Gregory played okay a little bit initially, but then kind of evaporated. But they just never got anything out of their defensive line last year, ever.
No, it was arguably the most disappointing, biggest build unit maybe in the entire NFL in terms of underperformance, what you expected, the tone that you just expected them to set in each and every game. They didn't do it. They didn't do it.
Hargrave wasn't worth the money. I mean, they blew off their depth for Hargrave, and then they realized about 5-6 games in that, man, Ebukam and Aziz and, some of those guys up front that they said goodbye to, not to mention Emmanuel Mosley and the changes they made in the secondary, Jimmy Ward, they lost like 5 good run defenders, replaced them with a pass rushing tackle, and then looked up and said, wow, our run defense sucks.
We're not as good as we used to be.
Why are we not good against the run? Well, I don't know. You let 5 good run defenders walk out the door, including your edge-setting Samson Ebukam, one of your tackling machines, and Azeez Al-Shaair, one of the most physical safeties you've ever had, and in Jimmy Ward, one of the most physical corners you've ever had, and Emmanuel Mosley, and you replaced them all with guys who weren't as good against the run, and you weren't as good against the run. So, to me, they really sold out for the big name guy, and they lost their depth and their quality and their run D, and then they couldn't stop the run. Couldn't stop the run really all year. They just scored so many points in certain games that teams stopped running.
Nick Bosa was a disappointment last year, if we're being completely honest, right? I mean,
not as big a disappointment as Hargrave, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The whole thing didn't work like it was supposed to, and we all know it, and there's no reason to pretend that didn't just happen. It needs to get better. They need to improve there. They went out through free agency trying to improve it. I'm just telling you that the decisions that they made, they better hit. Jordan Elliott,
the decisions have been made. I mean, there's no, nobody's walking through that door to save anybody. So is Jordan Elliott and Malik Collins an upgrade on Eric Armstead, or is it a lateral move, or is it a severe downgrade?
Right.
I mean,
somebody told me
it's hard to know.
Malik Collins is only good against the run. Well, that's fine, because that's exactly the area of improvement that he's got to be on the field to address. I mean, getting better against the run is something that this defensive line needs to do. They just can't have Fred Warner be the mop-up man behind them for any and all mistakes to line of scrimmage.
They've got to get something. Jordan Elliott, to me, I thought Jordan Elliott was supposed to be the guy against the run, and Collins was more of a pass rusher. But either way, they've got to. I think Jordan Elliott was a great signing. Why? Because he's young. I think he can play the run. He was this, according to PFF, he was the 6th best defensive tackle against the run when he was on the field last year. So I'm hoping Jordan Elliott and Malik Collins are an upgrade from Armstead, but I don't know. I can't say for sure. I definitely know that Floyd's an upgrade from what they had, but then they're also still leaning on some of the other defensive ends like Drake Jackson and these other guys to kind of step up and play. So what are they up front? That to me is a big one. And then you lost Dre Greenlaw for a big chunk of the year. He was your, if not your best defensive player, one of your 2 or 3 best defensive players. And a guy that makes tons of tackles and huge impact. So now you're replacing him with Devondre Campbell. That's not an upgrade. That's a downgrade. How healthy are you at safety with Talanoa Hufanga coming off the ACL? Is he going to play right away? And then how good are you on the corner? I mean, there's lots of questions on defense. I think offensively, the line is going to be always a concern, especially on the right side. But is Pooney going to be good enough to compete for the starting right guard job? And then how much do you use Pearsall? How much do you use Cowing? How much do you use Schrader, Garendo, those new weapons that you have? So, I mean, I think the offense looks more dynamic and maybe a little deeper on the offensive line. The defense is very much a question mark.
Well, and it just feels, and we were on this all last year, it feels like the NFL has made a strategic choice to combat all this defensive line talent, not just that the 49ers have, but around the league. This is a ball is out in under 2-second league now. It's out. The ball's out. There's, congratulations on your team full of elite pass rushers. There's really no pass to rush that you can even get to in that short a time. So it feels like the league went out of its way to combat great defensive lines just with strategic choices, getting that ball out really fast. And that means that the 49ers got caught over-invested in a position group that might not play the way it used to because the league doesn't play quite the way it used to. And
I mean, they'll benefit from it offensively in that now they've got another guy in Pearsall. They don't have to sit there and wait on Chris Jones. They can get the ball out quickly themselves. But yeah, as far as what's it going to do to their defense, how good are they on the second level? How good are they in the secondary?
That's why I thought the price.
You got a new coordinator. You've got Brandon Staley there. How's that whole thing going to work out between Sorensen and Staley? Especially if it's not an instant success. If it's an instant success, it all works out. If it's not an instant success, then you've got Staley, who's been a successful defensive coordinator and a not successful head coach, standing there over a first-year coordinator in Nick Sorensen. So, I mean, don't tell me that doesn't have problems written all over it. I mean, if they get off to a slow start, is Sorensen going to be blamed? Are the players going to be blamed? Is Brandon Staley going to grab the wheel? Is Shanahan going to allow him to grab the wheel? Do you want him to grab the wheel? Is he even have the same scheme?
Take the wheel. Oh.
I mean, does he even have the scheme that? I mean, his scheme's been quite a bit different than their scheme. So,
yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, there's some unknowns here.
Yeah, that's why one of my premises was maybe they're evolving their defense into a 3-4, and just kind of I think hybrid's about to be the word. I think you're going to
But
see.
they're not, because they're going with the wide 9 front, with Kosaric which is at its base a 4-3 look. So I don't think they're changing to the 3-4. If they are, you'd have to change out a number of your defensive linemen. You'd have to make Nick Bosa an outside backer at 270 or whatever. I don't know.
I honestly believe we're going to see Nick Bosa line up more at D tackle this season than in any other year that he's played. The fastest way to the quarterback is a straight line. And this is why I think the price for guards and centers went up in the league this year, because defensive tackles are probably as big of a big of an element of your pass rush now as they could have ever been. It's not just the edge guys going to get the quarterback. You got to go up through the middle, and maybe this is where Hargrave starts to pay off for the 49ers. But I thought that, with
Bosa inside, I don't think both. I mean, Yatir Gross-Matos, I think, is going to be inside, and I think you're going to see, they'll still do a lot of stunting and twisting and movement up front. But I think, if they're going to go back to that all defensive end look, you're going to see Gross-Matos as the bigger bodied guy, probably lining up inside, and maybe Drake Jackson, who at times had success lining up inside. But they've got to figure out who they can depend on this defensive line. They're going to camp with another 15 or 16 defensive linemen, and they're going to have to, make do with that. They also paid, Evan Anderson as an undrafted free agent, $280,000 guaranteed. They gave him $30,000 signing bonus. They gave him $250,000 as a roster bonus that's guaranteed. So even if he doesn't make the team, they've invested almost $300,000 in this undrafted free agent defensive tackle out of Florida Atlantic. And that's going to be interesting, because he was kind of a overweight, slow guy who didn't get a lot done. Now he's dropped down to 320 from 360, and he's doing backflips into his pool. And obviously they love him because they gave him a mint to sign as an undrafted free agent. Can he play a role? Can he stop the run? Can he give them another 2-gap guy in the middle, replacing Kinlaw? They didn't stop the run last year. So, that's a big one. Can they run the ball? Can they stop the run? Is the offensive line going to be improved? Is Pooney going to, who's going to start? I mean, is Pooney good enough to start? Is Burford good enough to start, or were they going to lean on Feliciano, who's been in the league forever? What about Brendel? Now you got DJ Reader in Detroit. So, he really made Brendel look
if
bad.
Feliciano is out there, I really believe if Feliciano's out there in week 1, shame on Spencer Burford. Shame on Pooney. Shame on these young bucks who were supposed to take an old vet like that in the last season of his career and turn him into a backup. Shame on these young men if they're not able to do that, because
Feliciano, I don't know, shame, but I mean, the bottom line is that you got to, it's on Forster as well. I mean, you handpicked these linemen. You're the O-line coach. If they can't play, it's kind of on you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a whole couple drafts here where you could have picked offensive linemen. You've picked these guys. Pooney and Burford better play. I mean, I'm not saying that, Burford's got to play tackle, but they better get, have decent offensive line play. Otherwise, Forster, I think, is on, gets called on the carpet, because it's his picks. And, those are his guys.
There's a lot of Burford is done. Burford puking face going on I think Spencer Burford had a better year than a lot of people want to admit, and it's year 3 for him. And year 3 is supposed to be the year it really kicks in. This guy started an awful lot of NFL games before he's even turned, 25 years old.
I mean, he's a good prospect. He really is. He's smart. He's got the ideal arm length, body type.
Trent Williams believes in him. Trent Williams thinks that's a real player.
I think he's a real player. He just had a regression in year 2, and he needs that. They just need to coach him up and get ready. I mean, he played tackle at Texas San Antonio. Then he came in as a rookie, played a little bit at guard, and looked pretty good. This year he kind of regressed, I thought, and they need him to take a major step forward.
By the way, that's not uncommon, right? I mean,
no.
Progress is not linear athletically. It's not. It's just, it isn't. You don't always get better, never take a step back. It's the old, you hear Kruk and Kipe talking about it. Once the league gets a book on you, then you got to make your second adjustment of your career and then the third adjustment of your career. And it's just like that for offensive linemen as well. So I believe in the guy. Getting back to the whole, am I crazy thinking it's all about, McKivitz, good year, boomer bust for the entire offense. I saw Coach Yak on Twitter. You follow him?
I would go with Kittle, by the way, as the guy who's the key guy, because there is nothing behind him. So if you don't have George Kittle, you're going to replacement level talent. So I would say this season, if it's going to ride on one individual, it's going to ride on George.
Okay. I mean, I don't think that's a bad call at all. At least the one guy you're putting it all on is like, 65 catches for 1,000 yards. You can almost put it down before the year even starts. It's kind of who he is. But yeah, if he were to get hurt, if something were to happen to take him out of the picture, that tight end room has question marks quickly that pop up.
You've got backup. You've got contingency plans at receiver now. You have contingency options at running back. Obviously Purdy's Purdy. There's no real, there's a major step down there. But right. George Kittle, the number 2 tight end for the Niners, is who?
Mason Klein,
Cam Latu.
Oh boy.
Jake Tungs, Eric Saubert.
Hey, it's time to go sign Robert Tonyan, is it not?
Well, that's what you just said. Coach Yak, he actually just put that out this morning. They ought to go get Robert Tonyan, and I agree. They should go get a veteran tight end who can block, who can be a solid number 2 tight end.
Right. And God forbid something happened to Kittle, you have you still got an actual tight end out there.
Who somebody's going to defend.
Who's done it?
I love Mason Klein as a prospect, and I like him. He's more of a receiving tight end than a blocker, but it would be nice if they had one more established. I mean, even if it was Mercedes Lewis and they were going with an old guy who can block, at this point, they either need a solid veteran tight end who can do a little bit of everything, or they need a blocking tight end. They have. Klein can be a receiver. I think Kittle can be a receiver. But as far as, like Dwelly, I don't think that's the ideal guy because he's only a receiver. You need if you add a tight end, he better be able to block a little bit.
By the way, to echo what I just saw from someone in the chat here, Niners Sickness Podcast says, come on, you got like 300 people in the chat, only 24 likes. Yeah, get on it. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. Thanks very much.
Hit like and subscribe, everybody.
Like and subscribe. Even
if you hit like, that just helps more people in the algorithm kind of find the shows. And if you hit subscribe and you hit that notification bell every time we go live, you'll get a little notification that we're going live, so you don't have to miss any of the extravaganza. So there we go.
God forbid. Again, just to quickly get back to the whole McKivitz thing, and I'll be done. And what Coach Yak put out on Twitter, it didn't even feel like Trent Williams had this good of a year. Like I thought that Trent Williams had an all right year last year for the 49ers. A lot of penalties, some undisciplined choices on field, throwing punches, and just bullshit a veteran like that who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer shouldn't do. But okay. Trent Williams allowed 20 pressures last season, 0 sacks. Aaron Banks allowed 36 pressures last season, 0 sacks. Jake Brendel, 33 pressures. He allowed 2 sacks. John Feliciano, 22 pressures, 1 sack. Spencer Burford, 37 pressures, 5 sacks. Colton McKivitz got put out on that island. 59 pressures and 9 sacks is what he allowed. Again,
3 of them, though, against TJ Watt in week 1. He had a disastrous week 1, and he kind of regrouped from there. He also pitched a shutout in the playoffs against Detroit and Green Bay.
If he can cut that sack number in half, Larry, 49ers just became a much better pass protection team. Absolutely. I mean, look, most right tackles are giving up 9, 10, 12 sacks. I don't think that that's abnormal anymore because you got teams drafting defensive linemen and throwing their best defensive linemen now not at left tackles anymore. That feels like a little bit of a stalemate. They're taking their best defensive tackles and throwing them on the right side, or the best defensive ends and edge rushers and putting them on the right side. This is why.
Or they're just overloading that
right,
side.
This is why you got
we'll
Bosa.
send two guys off the edge.
Nick Bosa
you can only block one.
Right tackles. He's good enough to beat any left tackle in football, but he lines up against right tackles, and other teams are doing that too. So, your right tackle is pretty much going to be outgunned in just about every snap he faces. I think McKivitz can get better. I really do. McKivitz and Burford, you two guys come in and have big years. The 49ers can be back in the Super Bowl. And then you said,
I'd love to see Pooney. I'd love to see Pooney get in there and start. I mean, you drafted him in the 3rd round. It's not like he, was a young guy. He's a 5th-year senior. He's coming off a really good year.
Do you think they would ever give him snaps at center in training camp?
I mean, he says he can play all 5 spots.
Yeah, that's the book.
To me, I mean, I would be very open-minded about my offensive line right of Aaron Banks. You got Trent at left tackle, you got Banks at left guard, and then it's just a open tryout. Do you go with Brendel? I mean, Brendel's has been a Pro Bowl alternate 2 years ago. I know they like Brendel. They think he's smart, but he's about 285, 290, and I think Ben Barch is going to be in the mix for that starting spot at center.
Nick Zakelj.
Nick Zakel's a big tough guy as well, and he's keenly aware that he's had his rookie year, he's had his kind of scholarship time. It's time for him to step up, and obviously he's Brock Purdy's best buddy. Right. But I mean, he's smart, he's tough, he's big. Maybe he could play right guard, maybe he could play center. But I mean, Zakelj, where's he fit in? Where does Burford fit in? Do you lean on Feliciano? Do you lean on Brendel at center? It seems like they've got options at center and guard. They don't seem like they got tons of options. I mean, they like Jalen Moore. John Lynch said, hey, we like Jalen Moore as our swing tackle. So they feel like they're covered between Trent and McKivitz and Jalen Moore. I would feel a whole lot better if they had a terrific young tackle in the pipeline. And they just don't. So they're going to have to lean on what they got.